Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a tale that's been echoing since the dawn of kings. How the Muses, those divine singers of fate, wove songs that decided who would rule, who would fall, and who would simply be remembered as a cautionary footnote. You're not just here to listen, you're about to slip under the moonlit canopy of an ancient forest, where every leaf seems to hum with a secret. You can almost smell the damp earth, feel the chill of the night air on your neck, and hear a distant note, soft as a sigh, coming from deep within the shadows. And don't kid yourself, you probably won't survive this. Because the Muses' songs don't care who's mortal or immortal, they just sing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments, where are you listening from and what time is it there? I always love to see how far these stories reach. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You find yourself in a dark grove where moonlight slices through the branches in thin silver ribbons. Around you 9 figures gather, sisters with eyes like starlight, and hair that ripples like ink in water. The Muses. They're not the sweet, tinkling muses you might imagine from Renaissance paintings. No, tonight they're closer to forest spirits, wild, cryptic, half lost in their own music. You watch as they stand in a circle, each holding a slender bone-white staff that hums with an unearthly vibration. Their voices start low, almost a hum in your chest, vibrating with a power you can't quite understand. Clio, the muse of history, begins to sing first, her voice weaving through the cold air like a thread of gold. She sings of kings who rose from nothing only to be swallowed by everything. You see them flicker past you, ghostly images of rulers with iron crowns and hollow eyes. One of them looks directly at you, and you feel the weight of centuries pressing down. Beside Cleothalia's laughter crackles through the darkness. Her song is a mocking echo. She sings of kings who thought themselves gods, only to be toppled by a slip of fate or a poisoned cup. Her laughter is a reminder destiny doesn't care how good your hair looks in your crown. Then Calliope steps forward, her song deep and resonant, rolling like distant thunder. She sings of battles fought and lost, of kingdoms that flicker like candle flames before being snuffed out. Her voice is a steady heartbeat, a reminder that all glory is fleeting. The Muses' song swirls around you, the air itself trembling as if it might shatter from the sound. You hear names, Midas, Croesus, Xerxes, echoing in the dark. The beat of their fates matches the rhythm of your own pulse. You can almost see the threads of these kings' destinies, thin silver lines stretching through the forest, each one vibrating in tune with the Muses' voices. A soft breeze brushes your cheek, scented with night-blooming flowers you can't quite name. It's sweet, but there's a bitter edge like honey spiked with wormwood. You glance up and see the crescent moon hanging low in the sky, a pale scythe ready to cut those threads if the Muses' song says it's time. Somewhere in the distance an owl calls, and the Muses pause, heads tilted as if listening. For a moment all you hear is the rustle of the forest and your own breath. Then Euterpe lifts her flute and a single aching note shivers the air. It's beautiful, so beautiful it hurts. You feel your skin prickle, a reminder that beauty can cut as deeply as any sword. One by one the Muses add their voices back in. The forest seems to lean closer, branches creaking like old bones as they listen. You realize that even the trees bow to the Muses' song, their roots digging deeper, their leaves shivering in silent applause. You can't help but wonder, do the Muses sing for everyone or just for kings? Do they hum the same lullaby for beggars and warriors, or is their music only for those who dare to wear a crown? Historians still argue whether the Muses were ever real, if they were flesh and blood, or simply the echo of our own hopes and fears. But as you stand here feeling their song wrap around you like a shroud, it's hard to believe they're just a myth. Suddenly, you hear a note that's different, lower, more dangerous. Melpomene steps forward, her face half hidden by her long hair. She sings of tragedy of kings undone by a single choice, a single misstep on the world stage. Her voice is a blade slicing through the other harmonies, and for a moment you swear you feel it cut you too. The forest grows colder, the air thick with the scent of wet earth and something older, muskier. You realise that this isn't just a song, it's a summoning. The Muses are calling the stories to life, pulling them from the darkness to stand before you. Each note is a thread, and together they weave a tapestry that glows faintly in the night, a map of fate written in sound and shadow. Erato's melody is softer a balm against the sharpness of Melpomene's song. She sings of love, the kind that crowns kings and the kind that breaks them. Her voice is a promise and a curse sweet enough to make you forget the cold creeping up your spine. The song builds layer upon layer until you feel like you're standing at the centre of a storm made of sound. The Muses' eyes flash with light that isn't from the moon, and you see their lips curve into small knowing smiles. They know the end of every story before it even begins. The ground beneath your feet feels alive, pulsing with the beat of the Muses' music. You want to step back to run, but your legs are rooted to the earth. You're part of the song now, no turning back. As the final note fades into the night, the Muses lower their staffs and the forest exhales. The silence is almost as loud as their music, and you realise your heart is racing. You're left with an ache you can't quite name, a hollow space where the song once lived. You take a shaky breath and look around. The Muses are already moving their shapes, slipping back into the forest shadows. But you know they're not done. They're just getting started, and so are we. The Muses' song lingers in your ears like an echo as you find yourself at the threshold of a grand feast. The air is thick with roasted meats, honey-slicked fruits, and the low, contented murmur of 100 voices. Gold gleams in the lamplight on platters, on goblets, even in the eyes of the king seated at the head of the table. King Midas, his name as rich as the treasure he hoards, lifts his golden cup in a toast, but you know the Muses are already whispering behind the laughter. You take a step closer, and the scent of spiced wine wraps around you, cloying and heady. Midas's fingers, thick and greedy, drum against his goblet, each beat a tiny chime of gold. The Muses stand just behind him, invisible to the rest, but clear as moonlight to you. They're singing a soft harmony that threads through the laughter like a secret. Midas doesn't seem to hear it, but you do. Oh, you do. The king's table groans under the weight of opulence, roasted boars stuffed with herbs, pomegranates split open like rubies, and loaves of bread as pale as dawn. You see the servants' scurry heads bowed low, and you catch the flash of fear in their eyes. They know the curse of this banquet, even if the guests are too drunk to notice. And then there's Midas himself, his face flushed with wine, his smile too wide. He laughs as he dips a crust of bread into a golden bowl of honey, but the Muses' song is a counterpoint, sweet and mournful. Clio's voice whispers of kings who think themselves immortal, their names etched in gold, but their bones just as breakable as yours. You watch Midas's fingers brush against a peach, and in an instant it turns to solid gold. A fruit that will never rot, never nourish, never feed. A fruit as dead as the king's soul if he keeps listening to his own greed. Historians still argue whether Midas was a real man or just a cautionary fable, an ancient warning against the hunger for more. But tonight he's as real as the air in your lungs. Thalia's laughter flickers through the music, a sharp note of mockery. She sings of feasts where gold is worth more than life, where laughter covers the rattle of death's hand. Her song is a mirror held up to Midas's gleaming eyes. He sees only his reflection, but you see the rot beneath the shine. The Muses' song grows louder, though no one else seems to notice. You feel it in your bones, a vibration that hums in the marrow. The guests chatter on, oblivious to the icy fingers of destiny wrapping around their throats. One woman, her hair bound in golden threads, leans close to the king, her lips a promise. But the Muses sing her name too, weaving her fate into the tapestry. You wonder if she hears it in her dreams. A child runs past chasing a carved wooden toy, and for a moment the music softens Erato's melody, a gentle note that speaks of innocence. But even that is swept away by Melpomene low sorrowful refrain. She sings of what comes after the feast when the wine is gone and the guests are dust. You lean against a marble pillar, feeling the cold bite through the warmth of the feast. The Muses' song is everywhere now, in the flicker of the candles, in the heavy air that tastes of gold and sweat. You watch as Midas lifts his cup again, toasting to himself, to his power, to the kingdom he thinks he owns. But the Muses know the truth, he's just a note in their endless song. You catch sight of a tiny, almost forgotten detail, a silver bowl set to the side holding a plain wooden cup. A single olive branch rests in it, green and alive, untouched by Midas's greedy fingers. The Muses' song hovers around it like a sigh, a reminder that not everything can be gilded, that life fragile and plain has a power no gold can match. The king doesn't see it. He doesn't see how the Muses' eyes glint with something older than his throne. He doesn't feel the weight of their music pressing against the walls, rattling the chandeliers like a ghost's breath. He's too busy drowning in his own reflection, the golden shine that blinds him to the shadow creeping in. A servant trips spilling wine that pools on the marble floor dark as blood. You see the Muses smile's tiny secret things, and you know they're already singing the next verse. Midas's fate is sealed, written in a song that's older than any king. He thinks he's the master of gold, but gold is just another chain, and the Muses are the ones who forged it. A breath of wind sweeps through the hall, though the doors are closed. It carries the scent of earth and leaves a cold reminder that all feasts must end, all kings must fall. Midas's laughter falters for a moment, his eyes flickering to the darkened corners of the room. Does he hear it? The note of warning in the Muses' song, the hush that falls before the final chord. You lean closer, drawn by the music, and for a heartbeat, you see Midas not as a king, but as a man, just a man clutching at gold as if it could keep him warm. The Muses' voices rise a shimmering chorus that speaks of endings of dust and shadows, and the echo of crowns that once gleamed in the firelight. And then the song softens the Muses, stepping back their circle, loosening. They leave Midas to his feast, to his gold and his laughter and the fate he can't escape. You step away too, the taste of honey and ashes on your tongue. The Muses' song follows you, a gentle hum that reminds you even in the brightest halls the night is always waiting. The music of the Muses fades to a low thrum in your ears as you step away from the revelry of Midas's golden feast. You find yourself treading a narrow stone path, its ancient slabs worn smooth by centuries of pilgrims' feet. Above the sky is a dark velvet dome punctured by cold stars that seem to wink knowingly at the world below. The Muses' song is quieter here, more an undertone than a melody guiding you deeper into the heart of prophecy itself. You arrive at the Oracle of Delphi, the temple of Apollo, perched like a crown on the side of Mount Parnassus. Marble columns gleam in the moonlight, their white surfaces etched with stories older than any mortal king. Smoke coils from a brazier, sweet with the scent of laurel and something sharper like burned honey. The air is heavy with mystery, and you feel it settle on your shoulders like a cloak. The Muses gather at the temple's threshold, 9 shadows in the flickering torchlight. They stand silent now, their song replaced by the murmurs of the Pythia, the oracle herself. You watch as she sways above a fissure in the earth, her eyes clouded by the fumes that rise from the chasm. She speaks in riddles, her voice a cracked whisper that echoes off the marble walls. You step closer, drawn by the power in her words. The Muses do not sing here, they listen. Even they, with their timeless music, pause for the oracle's visions. Cleo leans forward, her face intent as the Pythia's words tumble out like dark pearls. A king will rise, a king will fall, and in his ruin the seeds of another's crown will bloom. You shiver. The oracle's voice is a dry wind that scours the soul. Her words are never clear, always shifting like sand in an hourglass. Historians still argue whether the oracle's visions were genuine glimpses of the future, or clever manipulations by temple priests. But here in the cold breath of the mountain you can almost see those flickering fates, feel them brush against your skin like moth's wings. The Pythia's attendants move like shadows, offering bowls of water and sprigs of laurel to those who dare to seek answers. You watch a young prince kneel before the oracle, his face pale and tight. He asks if his war will bring glory or ruin, his voice cracking on the word glory. The Pythia tilts her head, the fumes swirling around her like a serpent's coils. Her answer is a riddle, one that will haunt him long after he leaves this place. The Muse's eyes gleam with something like pity. Erato hums a soft note under her breath, a counterpoint to the oracle's harsh pronouncements. Her melody speaks of love and longing, of how even a king's fate can be changed by the gentle touch of another's hand. But the oracle's voice is relentless, a cold bright thread that cuts through Erato's sweetness. A gust of wind rushes through the temple, stirring the torches so that their flames dance like restless spirits. You feel the mountain tremble beneath your feet, as if it too listens to the oracle's song. In a corner of the temple, an old statue of Apollo gazes down, lips curved in an enigmatic smile. The god of prophecy, the god of music, he watches over the muses, over the kings who come and go, over the stories that never truly end. A fringe fact drifts through your mind, one that always makes you pause. Some ancient sources claim that the Pythia would chew laurel leaves before speaking a ritual that blurred the line between divine vision and mortal delirium. You wonder if it matters whether the future is truly seen or simply woven from the threads of what we fear most. You step back from the oracle's seat, the scent of laurel still clinging to your skin. The muses stir their song, resuming as a gentle murmur. They sing of the power of words, of how a single riddle can shape empires and topple thrones. You see it in the flicker of the Pythia's eyes, in the way the young prince trembles as he rises from his knees. The temple walls seem to breathe around you, their cold marble alive with the whispers of the past. You feel the weight of it, the countless kings who stood here desperate for a glimpse of the future, only to find themselves more lost than before. You realize that the muse's song is not always comfort, it's a challenge. A question: will you listen, or will you let your fear drown out the music? A hush falls as the Pythia's voice breaks the fumes, thinning in the cold night air. The muses step closer, their song swelling again. Melpomeni's voice is a lament, a low sigh that seems to echo off the temple walls. She sings of kings who ignored the oracle's riddles, who thought themselves above fate. You see them in the shadows, faces carved in stone, names half lost to time. But there is also hope in the song, a note of possibility that winds through the dark like a silver thread. Terpsichore, with a faint smile, spins a single step on the marble floor, her movement light and quick. She reminds you that fate is never fixed. It's a dance, a shifting melody that can change in an instant. The oracle's attendants extinguish the torches one by one, plunging the temple into darkness. The muses turn away, their circle reforming as they step back into the forest's edge. You follow them, your breath ghosting in the cold air. Behind you, the oracle's seat is empty. The fumes gone, but the memory of her voice sharp and final lingers. The muses lead you down the mountain path, their song a lullaby of questions that have no easy answers. The night deepens and you feel the weight of history in your bones, a reminder that every king's fate is just another verse in the muses' endless song. and as you walk, the melody wraps around you soft and insistent, calling you onward to the next chapter of the tale. The path winds down the mountain each step, carrying you closer to the edge of a river that glitters in the moonlight like a silver snake. The Muses' song has shifted, growing deeper and darker, and you sense the weight of another king's fate hanging in the cold night air. You hear the name Croesus whispered between their harmonies, and you know the next story is ready to unfold. The river's current is slow but strong, and the water shivers with reflections of ancient temples and half-forgotten prayers. Croesus, king of Lydia, once stood at these banks, his wealth so vast that even the Muses' song seemed to glisten with gold when they sang of him. His robes were woven with threads of light, and his voice was honeyed with confidence. He was the richest man in the world, or so the stories said, and he believed that made him untouchable. You step closer to the water's edge, feeling the chill seep into your boots. The Muses cluster nearby, their voices blending in a bittersweet lament. Clio sings of Croesus's endless treasure, his vaults groaning under the weight of gold coins stamped with his seal, his walls hung with tapestries richer than any autumn sunrise. The forest around you seems to sigh with each note, the trees bowing low as if burdened by the weight of his ambition. But in the Muses' song you hear the faint rustle of something else, a warning woven between the threads of gold. Croesus had a pact with this river, you remember, the Pact of the Halys. The river marked the boundary of his kingdom, the edge of everything he thought he owned. And beyond it waited the empire of Persia, the relentless tide of conquest that would wash over him like a flood. A fringe fact tugs at your memory. Some say that Croesus's treasury held not just gold, but also the first minted coins in history stamped with lions and eagles, symbols of power meant to last forever. But power, like rivers, never stands still. You watch as the Muses turn to the river, their song growing softer, more hesitant. Arata plucks a single note on her lyre, and the water shivers in response. The river seems to hum along with her, carrying the song down to the sea and back again. A reminder that all boundaries are illusions, that even the strongest kings can be swept away. Croesus's story is one of hubris, but also of faith. He trusted the oracle at Delphi to tell him if he should go to war against Persia. The oracle's answer was as slippery as the river's current. If you cross the Halys, a great empire will fall. Croesus in his pride believed the empire would be Persia's, but the Muses know better. Clio's eyes flash with the irony that kings so often miss. You step into the river, the water cold as fate, and the current tugs at your ankles like 1,000 invisible hands. The Muses' song swells around you, a chorus of triumph and tragedy. Croesus built his empire on the glitter of gold, but the river sings of blood and ruin. You see him in your mind's eye, his crown, slipping his eyes wide with the shock of a future he cannot control. Historians still argue whether Croesus's downfall was inevitable, whether the oracle's riddles were fate's final word or just a reflection of his own arrogance. But as you stand in the river's cold embrace, you understand that the difference doesn't matter. The river doesn't care who rules its banks, it just keeps flowing, heedless of the kings who rise and fall along its shores. The Muses circle you, their song, a tapestry of echoes. Melpomene's voice is low and mournful, singing of Croesus's final night as king. Firelight flickers in the distance, his palace in Sardis, soon to be consumed by Cyrus's relentless army. The Muses' song weaves images of the Lydian king kneeling at an altar, his golden robes smudged with ash, his prayers swallowed by the roar of war. And yet, in the midst of the song's sorrow, there's a note of wonder. Terpsichore dances at the river's edge, her feet stirring the silt with each step. She reminds you that the river's flow is not just a threat, it's a promise. that even when empires drown, something new is always born in the eddies and whirls of change. You wade back to the shore, the Muses' melody softening into a hush. Croesus' story is done, but the river keeps singing a liquid memory that will outlast any king's reign. You watch the water swirl around a smooth stone, and you wonder if that's all any of us can hope for, to leave a ripple, a fleeting shimmer in the flow of history. The Muses gather once more, their circle tight and warm against the night's chill. Their eyes meet yours, and you see a question in them. Will you listen? Truly, listen to the music of rivers and fates? Or will you, like so many kings before, mistake the song for your own reflection? A breath of wind stirs the trees, and the Muses begin to walk. You follow them, the river's chill still clinging to your skin, the scent of laurel and old smoke in your lungs. Ahead the path curves into darkness, and you know another story waits beyond the bend, another king, another note in the Muses' endless song. The river murmurs behind you as you leave it, behind its voice weaving into the melody that carries you forward. You feel the weight of Croesus' gold still in the air, but you also feel the promise of the journey ahead, one that will carry you through palaces and battlefields, through glory and ruin, in the footsteps of kings who thought they could command the world. But as the Muses' soft harmonies remind you, even the greatest kings are just passengers on the river's endless course, echoes in the night fleeting as moonlight on water. The river's murmurs fade behind you, as the Muses lead you further along the winding path, the night deepening with each step. Ahead you see the flicker of torches against the sky's dark canvas, red sparks that glow like embers in the cold air. You feel the ground firm beneath your feet, the stones worn by centuries of warriors' boots. The Muses' song shifts again, weaving a melody of iron and blood, of discipline and duty. This is Sparta's song, and tonight you hear the fate of kings forged in the cold fire of the Agog. You arrive at the edge of a Spartan camp where the dawn's first light glows dimly over the crest of the hills. The air smells of sweat and leather, the faint tang of metal sharpening on whetstones. The warriors move with quiet precision, their eyes hard and bright, their breaths pluming in the chill. These are the men who will stand at Thermopylae, but for now they are sons and brothers bound by oath and blood. The Muses stand just beyond the glow of the torches, their song low and measured. Clio's voice is as sharp as a spear tip, singing of Sparta's dual kings Leonidas, and his shadow bound by lore and prophecy. The Muses know that even here in a city of warriors, destiny can be as fragile as a hair's breadth. You step closer, drawn by the hush of the warriors' movements. Leonidas stands among them, his shoulders broad beneath the red cloak that marks him as king. His face is weathered, his eyes steady and clear. You watch as he tests the edge of his blade, the faint hiss of steel, a counterpoint to the Muses' song. Historians still argue whether Leonidas truly knew the cost of Thermopylae before he marched. Some say he saw his fate in the oracle's riddles. Others claim he chose glory over survival with clear, unflinching eyes. But here in the shifting dawn light you see no fear in his gaze, only resolve, a steady flame that will not be snuffed out. The Muses' voices rise and fall around him, weaving tales of kings who ruled with iron in their fists and the cold certainty of death in their hearts. Terpsichore's steps are slow and deliberate, echoing the disciplined drill of Spartan soldiers. She moves in time with the clack of shields and the soft scrape of sandals on stone. A fringe fact slides into the melody. Some say the Spartan kings were not merely rulers, but also priests of Zeus Lacedaemon, sworn to both the spear and the shrine. Power and piety fused together like bronze and iron. You see that weight on Leonidas's brow, the twin burdens of war and faith that he carries without complaint. The sun's edge breaks over the hills, painting the camp in a harsh gold that flickers like the promise of battle. The Muses' song quickens, and you feel it in your blood, a thrill that is part fear, part awe. these are men who will not bend, who see death not as an end, but as a duty. You watch a boy no older than 16 testing the balance of his shield, his face pale but determined. The Muses sing his name too, though it will be lost to the ages. Leonidas moves among his warriors, his words soft but firm, a litany of encouragement that binds them tighter than any armour. The Muses' song harmonizes with his voice, each note a vow: stand firm, hold the line, die well. You feel the pull of that promise, the way it wraps around your heart like a chain. Even here, far from the blood and the dust, you feel the weight of that final stand. Melpomene's lament is a thread of sorrow in the music, a premonition of the blood to come. She sings of the narrow past the sea that will run red, the Persians who will crash against the Spartan shield wall like a tide that cannot be stopped. But even in her sorrow there is pride, a fierce glow that will outlast the last breath of every warrior on that field. Leonidas pauses by the river that trickles through the camp, his reflection rippling in the cold water. You wonder what he sees: a king, a warrior, a man who will be remembered long after his bones are dust. The Muses know, and their song is a promise he will not be forgotten. The dawn grows stronger, and the Muses step back, their voices softening into a lullaby that belies the iron edge beneath. The warriors tighten their belts, adjust their greaves, the clink of bronze a quiet hymn of readiness. You step back to your breath, misting in the cold morning air, and you realize that the Muses' song is not just for kings. It's for all who stand, who hold the line when the world turns dark. As you turn away from the camp, the first rays of the sun catch the bronze of Leonidas' helmet, the red of his cloak, the steady calm of his gaze. You feel the Muses' song settle in your bones, a hum of defiance, a heartbeat that echoes down the centuries. The path beckons you forward once more, and the Muses follow their steps light on the frost-crusted earth. Behind you, the warriors of Sparta begin their day, their voices raised in a chant that mingles with the Muses' melody, an anthem of duty, of sacrifice, of a king who will stand when all others have fallen. And so you walk on the sound of shields fading behind you, the Muses' song, a quiet promise that even in the face of death there is a beauty in the stand, a beauty that will sing on long after the last spear is broken. The sound of Sparta's chants fades into the soft hush of wind as you move beyond the last hill following the Muses' trail of song. The path winds east towards a sea that glitters in the half-light of dawn. The air grows heavy with salt, and you taste the memory of ancient battles in every breath. The Muses' voices shift again, no longer the iron-willed notes of Spartan kings, but a darker melody rich with the pride of a man who thought he could tame the very sea. The story of Xerxes, king of Persia, unfurls like a tapestry of ambition and defiance. The Muses sing of him as the sun lifts above the waves, painting the sky in streaks of rose and gold. Clio's voice is hushed, almost reverent, as she recounts how Xerxes commanded a bridge of boats to be built across the Hellespont, a floating highway for an army that would swallow Greece whole. You feel the thrum of the Muses' song beneath your feet, each note a reminder of the weight of Xerxes' dreams. Historians still argue whether Xerxes truly believed he was the master of land and sea, or whether he was just another mortal swept up in the echo of his own name. But here, with the dawn's light bright and cold, you see him for what he was, a man who believed his empire could conquer the gods themselves. The Muses gather on the shore, the wind playing in their hair, their eyes bright with memories of this mortal's hubris. Melpomene's voice is a warning, low and steady, a dirge for those who think the earth itself will bend to their will. You watch as the water laps at the pebbles, each wave a whisper of resistance. Xerxes' engineers worked day and night, you remember, lashing hundreds of ships together with thick hemp ropes, their decks planked over with timber. It was a marvel of ingenuity and empire's might bound together to defy the strait's shifting currents. Some say the bridge was over a mile long, a testament to human ambition that gleamed in the sun like a promise of glory. But the Muses know the price of such promises. The sea is never still, never tame, and when a storm rose it tore the bridge apart as if it were made of straw. Xerxes raged so fiercely that he ordered the waters themselves to be whipped 300 lashes for the defiance of Poseidon. A fringe fact that always brings a wry smile, the Persian king even had the sea branded with hot irons, as if that would teach the waves to kneel. The Muses' song grows louder, and you feel the rhythm of the waves beneath it, a pulse that no king can command. Terpsichore dances at the water's edge, her feet tracing patterns in the wet sand that wash away with every surge of foam. She reminds you that no matter how tightly Xerxes bound those ships, the sea was never his to own. The bridge was rebuilt, of course, this time stronger, more stubborn, like Xerxes himself. The Muses sing of the thousands who crossed it, soldiers in bronze helmets, chariots heavy with plunder, the endless march of empire on the move. The air tastes of sweat and fear of ambition stretched thin across the water's silver skin. You see Xerxes in your mind's eye, standing tall and proud on the shore, his robes snapping in the wind, his dark eyes fixed on the west. His voice is deeper command that echoes across the strait onward, forward into Greece, into legend. But the Muses' song never flatters. They sing of how even the greatest kings can be undone by a single wave, a single breath of the earth that will not be stilled. The bridge of boats creaked under the weight of men and hopes, each step a gamble against the sea's ancient patience. You feel the cold bite of the wind on your cheeks, the salt sting in your eyes, and you wonder, did Xerxes ever doubt? Did he hear the sea's quiet laughter beneath the drumbeat of his own heart? Melpomene's lament threads through the music like a warning. She sings of how pride can drown more surely than any tide, how the king who lashes the sea forgets that water cannot be caged. The Muses' eyes glimmer with something like sorrow as they watch the bridge fade into the distance of memory, its planks long gone but its lesson never lost. The army crossed and the Persian war machine rolled on, but the Muses know that the crossing itself was the true battle. Each wave that surged against those planks was a reminder that nature bows to no mortal crown. And even as Xerxes' soldiers marched deeper into Greece, the echo of the sea's defiance trailed them like a shadow. You stand on the shore, the last boards of the ancient bridge lost to the deep, the Muses' song soft against the rush of the tide. The wind tugs at your hair, the taste of salt sharp and clean, and you feel the weight of all those footsteps, men who thought they were masters, but who were just echoes in the endless rhythm of the sea. The Muses turn from the water, their eyes meeting yours. In their song you hear a question that has always lingered at the edge of every empire: can any man truly command the earth? Or are we all just children building bridges of driftwood and dreams against the tide? You step away from the shore, the roar of the sea fading behind you. The path curves onward, the Muses' song leading you deeper into the heart of kings and conquests. Each note carries the memory of Xerxes' bridge, a melody of ambition, and the cold, endless patience of the waves. And as you walk, you feel the Muses' music wrap around you like a cloak, soft but unyielding, a reminder that no matter how loudly we command the earth, always answers in its own voice. The scent of salt and sea lingers in your hair as you leave the shore behind. The Muses guide you inland, their song shifting into something wilder, fiercer, like a storm crackling in the distance. You feel the air grow warmer, a taste of dust and sun on your tongue, as the road carries you eastward to the edge of the known world. This is where Alexander waits a boy king who would call himself a god whose name still shivers down the centuries. The Muses gather around you, their eyes bright with the thrill of a new story. Clio's voice is hushed, but her words spark like flint on stone. Alexander of Macedon, born of storms and fire, who dreamed of a world that would kneel to his name. You see him in your mind's eye, standing at the edge of the known world, the sun blazing behind him like a crown. You hear the clash of bronze and iron in the Muses' song, a rhythm that quickens your pulse. Alexander's army was not just a force of men, it was a force of will, a tide that swept through Persia, Egypt and beyond. Historians still argue whether his conquests were driven by glory or by something deeper, a hunger that no empire could satisfy. But the Muses know the truth. Alexander was lightning made flesh, a spark that burned too bright to last. You feel the heat of the sun on your face as you follow the Muses' song to the edge of the desert. Here in the shifting dunes, Alexander stands with his generals, their armour dusted with red sand. He listens to the wind as if the very earth is speaking to him, and in that silence the Muses' voices rise soft and sharp, weaving a melody of ambition and fate. A fringe fact flickers through your mind. Some ancient sources claim that Alexander was descended from Achilles himself, a bloodline of warriors stretching back to the Trojan sands. It's a lineage that Alexander wore like a second skin, each victory a thread that tied him closer to the myths he loved so well. The Muses sing of his youth, how he tamed Bucephalus, the black horse that no other man could master. You see the horse's dark eyes flashing in the sun, the way Alexander's hands moved gentle and firm, taming the beast as he would tame the world. In that moment, even the Muses smile Terpsichore's feet, tapping out a quick, fierce dance in the dust. But Alexander was never content with taming horses. His gaze was always fixed on the horizon, on the lands that lay beyond the mountains and rivers of his childhood. You feel the weight of that gaze in the Muses' song, the way it stretched beyond the edge of the map into the lands of myth and dream. The Muses' melody grows louder, and you see Alexander's army marching through the mountain passes of the Hindu Kush, the wind howling like a chorus of ghosts. They say he wept when there were no more worlds to conquer, but the Muses' song suggests something else, that in the end it wasn't the world he wanted to conquer, but the silence that comes when no one dares to dream anymore. You watch Alexander kneel at the temple of Ammon in the Siwa oasis, seeking answers from a god who spoke in riddles and echoes. The desert sun burns bright overhead, and the Muses sing of that moment, how even the greatest kings bow their heads to the mysteries that lie in the spaces between words. Melpomene's voice is soft now, a lullaby wrapped in sorrow. She sings of Alexander's final days of the fever that took him in Babylon, the empire he'd carved from the bones of the world crumbling around his bed. You see the sweat on his brow, the way his hands still clenched the air as if trying to hold the horizon itself. Historians still argue whether he was poisoned or felled by his own endless drive, whether he was mortal after all. The Muses gather closer, their song folding around you like a warm shroud. They sing of how even the brightest star can burn itself out, how the greatest kings are still men bound by the same fragile thread as you. You feel that truth settle in your bones, a soft ache that lingers like the memory of thunder. As you walk with the Muses, you catch sight of a single olive tree growing at the edge of the desert, its roots deep in the dry earth. The Muses pause beside it, their voices soft and low. They sing of how even the conqueror of the world was just a man, and how the earth endures long after the last crown is dust. You step past the tree, the horizon stretching wide and endless before you. The Muses' song lifts on the wind, carrying the memory of Alexander's name, an echo that will never quite fade no matter how many kingdoms rise and fall. You realise as the path curves onward that the Muses are not just singing of kings. They're singing of the weight of dreams, of how each of us carries a spark that can light the world or consume it. And as you follow them, you feel that spark flicker in your own heart. Promise that even the quietest song can echo across the ages. The sun is high now, the desert wind warm and fierce, and the Muses' voices are a gentle hum in the silence. You walk on each step, carrying you deeper into the stories of kings and the music that weaves them into legend. The desert sun fades to a bruised twilight as you walk the Muses' song shifting like a shadow at your side. You feel the chill of evening settle into your bones, the air heavy with the scent of dust and distance. The Muses' voices weave around you softer now, touched with sorrow and finality. Ahead you see the shape of a city crumbling in the dusk. Thebes, the city of 7 gates, the city whose name will echo in tragedy long after the last stone falls. The Muses pause at the city's edge, their eyes bright in the fading light. Clio's voice is hushed, a reverent murmur that speaks of kings undone by pride and the weight of prophecy. Thebes has always been a place of riddles and ruin, a city where fate twists in the darkness. You feel it in the air, a hush that makes your heart beat faster. You step over the threshold of the first gate, the bronze doors still creaking on their ancient hinges. The city's streets are choked with dust, the stones worn smooth by generations of footsteps. The Muses' song drifts through the empty alleys, a melody of sorrow and inevitability. You hear names in their song: Oedipus Jocasta, the line of Cadmus cursed from its birth. Historians still argue whether Thebes' downfall was written in the stars or in the hearts of its rulers, but the Muses sing of both weaving a tapestry where destiny and choice are threads so tangled you can't see where one ends and the other begins. In their music you hear the footfall of kings who thought they could outrun prophecy, only to find it waiting for them at the city gates. You wander deeper into the city, the Muses' voices low and haunting. Thebes was once a place of power, its walls said to be built by the music of Amphion's lyre stones, lifted by song and set in place by a king who believed beauty could hold back the dark. But even the strongest walls can't hold forever. You feel the weight of those stones around you, the hush of a city that knows it will never wake again. A fringe fact shivers through your thoughts. Some say Thebes' 7 gates were named for the 7 planets known to the ancients, a cosmic symmetry that tied the city's fate to the stars. You wonder if the gates still remember those names, if they whisper them in the night when no one is listening. The Muses' song grows sharper, a keening note that cuts through the dust. Melpomene sings of Oedipus the king who answered the Sphinx's riddle, but could not solve the puzzle of his own life. You see him in your mind's eye, his face lined with the weight of truths he cannot bear, his eyes searching the shadows for answers that will only bring him ruin. Yocasta's voice joins the song, a soft lament that trembles like the last leaf of autumn. She sings of love turned to ash, of the secret that undoes them both. You feel her sorrow in the hush of the streets, in the echo of footsteps that will never return. The Muses lead you to the palace, its gates half broken, the air inside heavy with the scent of cold stone and old grief. You see the throne room empty now, the tapestries torn and faded. In the flicker of the Muses' music you see shadows of the past kings and queens who thought their blood would outlast the world, their names spoken with fear and reverence. But here in the silence they are just echoes. Terpsichore moves among the fallen columns, her dance slow and mournful. She reminds you that even in ruin there is a strange grace, a beauty in the way time unravels what pride has built. The Muses sing of Thebes not as a city of defeat, but as a testament to the price of certainty, the cost of a king's belief that he can stand alone against fate. The night deepens, the stars cold and distant overhead. The Muses' song softens into a hush, a whisper of endings. You feel it in the air, the final breath of a city that has given all it has to the gods, to the whims of kings, to the riddle that was always more than it seemed. As you step away from the palace, the Muses gather close, their eyes soft with the memory of Thebes' fall. In their song you hear a promise that even in the city's last sigh, there is a story that will never fade. Thebes may crumble, its kings may be lost to time, but the music of their choices, of their flaws, and their brief burning pride will echo on. The path leads you out of the city, the dust swirling around your feet. The Muses walk beside you, their song a gentle murmur that speaks of what waits beyond the walls. More kings, more fates, more stories waiting to be sung. You glance back, once seeing the towers of Thebes silhouetted against the stars, and you know that though the city has fallen, its song will linger in the night air forever. And as you turn away, the Muses' melody carries you forward, a soft thread of music that weaves the sorrow of Thebes into the endless tapestry of kings and the fates they cannot outrun. You leave Thebes behind, the memory of its cracked gates and ghostly songs trailing after you like the tail of a comet. The Muses' melody softens threads of iron and gold, weaving into a new shape, a new tale. You walk through a cold dawn, the sun a pale disk above hills that seem to hunch closer, as if they know the secrets buried beneath their roots. The Muses' voices are hushed, now wary and watchful. You're heading for Rome, and in Rome even the echoes of kings are wrapped in blood and myth. The Muses gather by a crumbling wall, their faces turned east, their voices dropping to a conspiratorial hush. Clio's voice is a whisper against the wind, Tarquin, the last of Rome's kings. His name drips from the Muses' lips like a curse, an omen wrapped in silk and ambition. You walk into the city feeling the weight of centuries pressing against your shoulders. Rome is still a kingdom here, not yet the republic that will devour its own children. The streets are rough with the scent of olive oil and iron, the air alive with the hiss of hot bronze, and the low murmur of power whispered behind closed doors. The Muses' song winds through the marble columns and cracked clay rooftops, a melody of shadows and flickering lamps. Historians still argue whether Tarquin was truly the tyrant of legend or a king painted monstrous by those who came after. But the Muses sing of what matters a king who thought the world itself was his to command, and who found his undoing not on the battlefield but in the quiet chambers of his own court. You watch him in your mind's eye, Lucius Tarquinius. Superbus, his robes of deep red, brushing the cold marble floors, his eyes dark and hungry. His court is a place of polished smiles and sharper knives of laughter that tastes like ashes. He is a man who knows how to wear a crown but not how to carry its weight. A fringe fact curls at the edge of the Muses' song. Some say Tarquin claimed divine ancestry, tracing his line back to the god of war himself. It's the kind of claim that can intoxicate a city, can convince a people to bow their heads just a little longer. But you feel the chill of the Muses' laughter at that gods do not play favourites for long. Melpomene's voice grows sharper, a note of warning that trembles like the flicker of a torch in the dark. She sings of Lucretia, a name that will split Rome open like a wound. You see her beautiful proud, the wife of a nobleman whose honour was her shield, and you see Tarquin's son, his shadowed smile a promise of ruin. The Muses sing of that night, of how Lucretia's cry shattered the hush of the Roman court, and how her blood became the seed of a republic. You taste the salt of tears in the Muses' song, the sharp copper tang of a death that would not be forgotten. The kings of Rome had ruled for centuries, but in Lucretia's name they found their end. The Muses' melody twists a cold thread of fate that even the mightiest throne can be toppled by the softest voice. The dawn grows brighter as you walk through the forum, the stones still echoing with the footfalls of men who will one day call themselves senators. The Muses' song hums in the air, soft and knowing. Tarquin may have thought himself invincible, but he was already a ghost in the making. Terpsichore moves among the broken columns, her dance a quiet reminder of how power can crumble in an instant. She steps lightly over the marble, her shadow long and delicate in the growing light. She reminds you that kings fall not when their armies are broken, but when their people turn their backs. The Muses sing of how Tarquin was cast out, driven into the night like a curse banished from the hearth. You hear the clash of shields in their melody, the ragged breath of men who have seen too much and will not bow again. The birth of the Roman Republic is in that song a promise of freedom that will come to be as blood-soaked as any crown. Historians still argue whether Tarquin's fall was the dawn of liberty or just another shift in who held the power. But as you walk with the Muses, their song makes it clear it was the end of a line, the closing of a chapter that had begun in fire and would end in dust. You pause by a crumbling archway, the Muses gathered close around you. In the hush of their voices you hear the final notes of Tarquin's reign, a song of pride turned to ruin, of a crown that became a noose. You feel the chill of that final breath in the morning air, and you know that even in the heart of the city that will one day rule the world, the music of kings is always touched by shadow. The Muses turn away their eyes on the road ahead. The melody of Tarquin's fall fades into the distance, replaced by a new note, a low, insistent hum that speaks of rivers crossed and fate sealed in cold moonlight. You follow them, the city of Rome at your back, the promise of another king's story, waiting just beyond the next bend. The path stretches before you, the Muses' song a soft murmur in the hush of dawn. You feel the weight of history in each step, the echo of voices that rise and fall like the tide. And as you walk on, you know the Muses will keep singing, weaving the threads of kings and the choices that break them one verse at a time. The Muses' voices drift ahead of you, winding through the narrow path like a breeze through ancient pines. The air smells of water and iron, a hint of frost sharpening the dawn. You follow them deeper into the hush of history, each step an echo of all those who have come before. The melody grows bolder, now more urgent, as you approach the banks of a river that has watched more kings fall than any sword. The Rubicon. A shallow stream, little more than a whisper of water over stone, yet its name is a thunderclap in every telling of empire. You feel the weight of it in the air, the promise and the peril that gather at this crossing. The Muses sing of Caesar, and their voices hold a strange electric joy. For this is the moment a man became more than mortal, more than king, a figure that would echo down the centuries for better or for worse. You stand at the river's edge, the water dark and glinting in the morning light. Clio's voice is rich and low, weaving the story of Julius Caesar, the man who saw the world as his chessboard and was never content to let the pieces stand still. The Muses' song thrums with the beat of horses' hooves and the sharp scent of cold air of men with hearts half sick with loyalty and half mad with fear. Caesar's face flickers in the Muses' song, broad brow hawk eyes that see not just the land before him, but the empire that will rise from its dust. You feel the hush of his legions waiting on the far bank, their breath white in the winter air. They know what this crossing means, the point of no return. The line that once stepped over redraws the map of the world. A fringe fact drifts through the melody. Some say Caesar paused at the river's edge, tossing a die into the air as if to let fate decide. Alia iacta est, he is said to have murmured the die is cast. Historians still argue whether those words were spoken in a moment of reckless bravado or cold, calculated resolve. But the Muses know that once the die is cast, there is no going back. The Muses' song grows sharper, the melody edged with the cold glint of steel. Terpsichore's feet skim the riverbank, her dance a mirror of the soldier's slow, deliberate steps. Each movement is a promise, a vow to stand by Caesar come what may. You see the shimmer of armour, the quiet fear in the men's eyes, the hush that falls as the first boot touches the water. You step closer, the river's cold breath brushing your skin. The Muses' voices rise a chorus of fate and consequence. They sing not of battles yet to come, but of the weight of this single choice, the way a single step can echo through generations. You watch Caesar's shadow blur in the river's dark glass as if the water itself is trying to swallow him, to hold him back from the world he's about to break open. The river is shallow but might as well be an ocean. You feel it in your chest, the rush of blood, the thrill of defiance that crackles like lightning. The Muses' song lifts you with it, carrying you into the hush of that morning when the world held its breath. Melpomene's lament shivers through the music, a low, mournful note that speaks of the price of ambition. She sings of what will come of Pompey's flight of Roman streets, that will run with blood of a republic that will choke on its own dreams. But there is pride in her voice too, a fierce glow that says even ruin has its music, even downfall its own terrible grace. The river laps at your boots cold as the steel in Caesar's hand. You watch him step forward, his cloak rippling in the wind, his face set like marble. In that moment he is not just a man, he is the hinge of history, the turning point that the Muses will sing of long after the last empire crumbles. The crossing is done in a breath, a quiet moment that will outlast the roar of 1,000 battles. The Muses' song softens the melody, curling around you like the hush that follows thunder. You see Caesar look back, once his eyes dark and clear, as if he hears the echo of every footstep that will follow his across that river. You turn away, the Rubicon's quiet voice fading behind you. The Muses gather close their eyes, bright in the new light of dawn. In their song you hear the weight of that crossing, the way it set the world spinning in a new orbit. You wonder how many kings have crossed their own Rubicons, since how many have stepped into the river and found that the water runs deeper than they ever dreamed. The path stretches on the Muses' song, a promise in the hush of the morning. You walk with them, your breath a quiet prayer against the cold. And as you go, you feel the echo of Caesar's footsteps in your own, the soft, relentless beat of choices that can never be unmade. The Muses' melody lingers a hush that speaks of rivers and thrones of kings who stand at the edge and choose to leap. And you know that in the end, every story comes down to this, the moment you take the step that changes everything. The hush of the Rubicon fades behind you, but the Muses' song doesn't falter, it curves forward, carrying you through the long corridors of time. The river is gone, replaced by the scent of warm earth and the heady sweetness of lotus blossoms. The air tastes of silk and promise. Ahead lies a woman whose name is a perfume, whose gaze has the weight of empires, Cleopatra. The Muses gather around you, their eyes bright with the thrill of this tale. Cleo's voice is honeyed now, rich with secrets and whispered bargains. She sings of Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt, whose footsteps were measured by the sighs of poets and the anxious dreams of kings. You see her in the Muses' melody, eyes lined with cold laughter like the slow ripple of water over marble, a mind as quick as any blade. You find yourself in Alexandria, the city of light, where knowledge was worshipped like a god, and the library's flame never quite flickered out. The Muses' voices hush to a slow, sultry hum, wrapping the city in a haze of amber and incense. You walk through narrow streets where scholars argue in the shade of colonnades, and every breeze seems to carry the scent of myrrh. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra was a ruler of ambition, or a lover lost in her own dreams, whether her empire was built on strategy or seduction. But the Muses know that a queen's power is always more than the sum of her alliances. They sing of a woman who was both scholar and sovereign, who spoke 9 tongues and wore a kingdom like a cloak. You see Cleopatra's face in the water of the Nile, her reflection shimmering as the river's current shifts. Her perfume said to be laced with rose, and myrrh hangs in the air like a memory. A fringe fact weaves itself into the Muses' song. Cleopatra's perfume was so famous that recipes for it endured centuries after her death, whispered in the courtyards of apothecaries who claimed to bottle her power. The Muses lead you to her palace, its white columns bright against the blue sky. Inside, the air is cool and scented with sandalwood. You see her there curled on a couch draped in linen as fine as spider silk, her fingers tracing the rim of a golden cup. Her voice is soft, but her words are sharpened steel. She speaks to Caesar and later to Mark Antony, her laughter a siren song that bends empires to her will. The Muses sing of her feasts where the music of flutes and the clink of silver cups was the backdrop to the quiet power of her gaze. She knew the weight of every glance, the ripple of every whispered rumour. In her court, beauty was a weapon, and every breath of jasmine-scented air was a thread in the web she wove. But the Muses' melody carries a note of sorrow too, a reminder that even a queen who commands the world's richest kingdom cannot silence the ticking of fate. Melpomene's lament is a low hum, a thread of prophecy that coils around the sweetness of the palace air. She sings of the end that waits, of the ships burning on the sea and the Roman legions marching closer with every dawn. You see Cleopatra in that final hour, her hair unbound, her eyes dark with something deeper than fear. The Muses sing of how she met Antony one last time, their hands tangled together as the world around them fell. In their song you hear the echo of all lovers who have stood together at the edge of ruin, how even the richest perfume cannot sweeten the taste of betrayal. Terpsichore moves through the halls, her dance slow and wistful. She reminds you that even in defeat there is a kind of grace, a beauty in the way Cleopatra held her head high as the shadows closed in. The Muses sing of the asp pressed to her skin, of the final breath that was hers alone to command. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra died for love or for the kingdom she could no longer save. But as the Muses' song fades into the hush of the night, you understand that she died on her own terms, her name still perfumed in the air long after the last petal fell. You leave Alexandria as the Muses turn away their song, a soft sigh against the Nile's quiet flow. The city's white columns fade behind you, but the scent of myrrh and roses clings to your skin. You feel the weight of Cleopatra's name, the way it lingers like a heartbeat in the hush of history. The path stretches forward once more, the Muses' melody rising to meet it. Ahead lie other kings and other fates, but for a moment you carry the perfume of a queen who made the world bend to her breath. You know the Muses will sing of her forever, her name woven into every lullaby of power and loss. And as you walk on, you feel the hush of the Nile at your back, the soft echo of Cleopatra's laughter in the evening breeze, and the promise that even in the final sigh there is music that will never fade. You walk on from Alexandria, the scent of roses and river water still clinging to your senses. The Muses' song twists around you like smoke, drawing you forward through time and across oceans of ambition. The air grows thick with the smell of burning wood and the faint tang of something metallic. Rome calls again, but not the marble grandeur of the Republic. It is the scent of fire, the echo of a fiddle, the dance of shadows on cracked stone. The Muses gather in a darkened courtyard, their faces turned toward the flickering glow on the horizon. Cleo's voice is low and steady, each word measured like a heartbeat. She sings of Nero, the emperor whose name still crackles like dry twigs in the night silence. His is a tale of music and madness, of a kingdom that burned while he played on. You step into the city, the alleys close and airless, the stones warm under your feet from the heat of a fire that never truly dies. The Muses' song sharpens and you hear the hiss of flame in every note. Nero's palace gleams with false gold, lavish banquets and peacocks strutting through perfumed halls. But beyond the walls the streets run red, and the city's voice is a scream swallowed by smoke. Historians still argue whether Nero really played his fiddle while Rome burned, whether he was the artist of chaos or simply its most devoted spectator. But the Muses' melody does not care for historical quibbles. They sing of a man who believed the world was his stage, who poured out his soul in music while the city he claimed to love turned to ash. A fringe fact flickers through your mind. Some say Nero's performances were so long and so loud that pregnant women in the audience went into labour, their cries of birth and pain. woven into the Emperor's final chords. Terpsichore's feet tap a slow rhythm, her dance half mocking, half mournful. She knows that even the finest music can't quiet the roar of history's flames. You watch as the Muses lead you through Nero's halls, each chamber more gilded than the last. Velvet curtains heavy with the scent of crushed flowers, floors of polished marble that seem to hold the echo of laughter that was never quite real. In the glow of lamplight you see Nero himself, his eyes bright with something that might be genius, or might be madness, his fingers plucking at the strings of a lyre that no song could save. The Muse's melody grows softer, winding around the crackle of distant fire. Melpomene's lament trembles on the edge of each note, a prophecy of ruin that even Nero's golden tongue cannot silence. You see the fear in the faces of his courtiers, smiles that flicker like candle flames' laughter, that sounds like the rattle of dry bones. They know the music is just another mask and that behind it waits the night. You step out into the streets, the fires glow brighter now, licking at the edges of the city like a predator's tongue. The Muses stand close, their eyes reflecting the orange flicker of rooftops collapsing in a rush of sparks. You hear the soft strain of a fiddle, the way the notes dance above the roar like a fragile promise. Whether Nero truly played, or whether the world simply remembers him that way, the Muses know that music is always part of the story, no matter how the flames devour the notes. Terpsichore's dance slows her feet, tracing ash and ember. She reminds you that even in the final moments of a city's breath there is still music, a low hum of memory that twines through the smoke. You feel it in the stones beneath your feet, the way they hold the heat of a fire that burned long before you were born and will burn long after. You catch a glimpse of Nero's face in the crowd, pale, almost beautiful, a flicker of something like defiance in his eyes. The Muse's song wraps around him a crown of sound and shadow. He believed that he could sing the world into silence, that the music of his own making was stronger than the screams of the dying. The Muses know better. They sing of how even the sweetest notes cannot drown out the crackle of fate. Historians still argue whether Nero was Rome's final artist or its final tyrant, whether he played or prayed as the city burned. But the Muses sing of him as he was a man who loved beauty so fiercely that he mistook it for truth, who thought he could shape the world's melody to match the song in his own heart. The fire fades to embers as you leave the city behind the Muses' song a whisper against your ear. Rome's skyline is jagged and broken in the dawn, a silhouette of ruin that will be rebuilt time and again. The Muses know that every city is both memory and promise, a song that rises and falls in the hush between heartbeats. You follow them away from the glow of Nero's fire, your footsteps quiet against the cold stone. The Muses' voices soften into a lullaby, each note a breath of smoke and silence. You feel the echo of music in your chest, soft, insistent, a reminder that even in the darkest nights there is always a song waiting to be sung. And as you walk on, you know that the Muses will keep singing of emperors and poets, of kings who play as their worlds burn, and of the quiet places between the flames where history catches its breath. You leave the crackle of Nero's Rome behind, stepping into the cool hush of early dawn. The air is crisp, tinged with the scent of fresh earth and iron. The Muses' song flows forward like a quiet river, carrying you from the smouldering ruins of the empire to a new crown, one that will be forged not in the blaze of ambition, but in the patient weight of centuries. Cleo's voice is warm now, tinged with reverence and something like wonder. She sings of Charlemagne the king, who dreamed of an empire that would outshine the echoes of Rome, who wore the iron circlet of a Holy Roman emperor, and bore the weight of faith and conquest in equal measure. You find yourself standing in the hush of Aachen, the capital of Charlemagne's realm. The air tastes of wood smoke and pine resin, the scent of hearths burning against the early morning chill. You see the great cathedral rising like a promise of permanence, its spire silvered by moonlight, its stones warm with the prayers of generations. The Muses gather at the cathedral's threshold, their song soft and solemn. Terpsichore moves slowly each step, a careful echo of the measured tread of a king's ambition. The music is slow here, heavy with the weight of oaths sworn in the hush of candlelit halls. Charlemagne's figure grows clearer in the Muses' melody, broad-shouldered, his brow creased with the burden of unity. He dreams of an empire that will bind warring tribes into a single voice, that will sing the same psalms across 100 altars. Historians still argue whether he was a king of peace, or a warlord cloaked in faith, whether the sword or the cross was the sharper edge of his reign. But the Muses know that for Charlemagne they were one and the same. A fringe fact weaves itself into the Muses' song. Some say that in Charlemagne's court, even the jesters had to be able to recite psalms by heart, that laughter was a prayer in the empire he built. You feel the echo of that strange union in the Muses' music, a melody of iron and incense of feast halls that smelled of roast meat and fresh parchment. You step inside the cathedral, the air cool and still, the scent of beeswax candles and old stone. The Muses' voices rise in a hush of awe, their song twining through the shadows like the slow ripple of Gregorian chant. You see Charlemagne crowned in the half-light, the iron circlet pressing into his brow. For a moment you glimpse the man behind the legend, a father, a warrior, a king whose dreams outstripped even his own reach. Melpomene's lament drifts through the melody like a faint breeze. She sings of the wars that shadowed Charlemagne's dreams of Saxon rebellions, crushed beneath mailed fists of lands conquered in the name of Christ and crown. The Muses' song never flinches from the price of empire, and you feel that truth settle into the hush of the cathedral's stones. Outside, the dawn brightens, gold light spilling across the city's roofs like a benediction. You watch the Muses step into that glow, their voices lifting in a quiet harmony that speaks of faith and doubt, of a king who tried to bind the world with both. Terpsichore's dance grows lighter, her feet tracing the slow swirl of empire's rise. She reminds you that even the greatest kings are just dancers on history's stage, their steps measured against the hush of the centuries. You see Charlemagne's court in that dance, scholars bent over illuminated manuscripts, warriors sharpening blades beside flickering fires, children learning to sing the same hymns that echo in these stones. Historians still argue whether Charlemagne's empire was a brief bright flare, or the seed of something that would flower across centuries. But the Muses' song carries both answers in its melody, a kingdom that rose and fell in the hush between breaths, and a legacy that lingers in every cathedral bell that tolls across Europe's dawn. You step back from the cathedral's shadow, the Muses close around you, their eyes bright in the pale morning light. In their song you hear the weight of that iron crown, the burden of a dream that never truly dies, even when the empire itself has crumbled into dust. The path stretches onward, the hush of the forest beckoning you forward. The Muses' melody shifts again from the slow grandeur of empire to the sharp clash of cold seas and storm-tossed ships. But for a moment you stand in that quiet dawn, the echo of Charlemagne's crown heavy in your chest. As you turn away, the Muses' song fades into a hush that is both prayer and promise. You feel the weight of centuries behind you, the slow, patient music of kings who dreamed of unity and found only the echo of their own voices in the night. And as you walk on, the Muses' song lingers a soft, insistent hum that carries the memory of Charlemagne's iron circlet and the hush of a cathedral that still holds his name in every stone. You leave the quiet glow of Charlemagne's cathedral behind, the Muses' song shifting with the crackle of frost under your boots. The air grows colder, the sky a slate grey that presses low over the hills. The hush of the forest deepens and you smell pine sap, and the faint tang of salt carried on the wind. The Muses' voices sharpen, edged with a wild note that stirs your blood, the song of the north of men who feared no crown but the weight of their own oaths. The Muses pause on a rocky ridge, their cloaks snapping in the icy wind. Cleo's voice is fierce, cutting through the hush like a blade drawn from a sheath. She sings of the Viking kings, the jarls who carved their thrones from dragon-proud ships whose feasts smelled of mead and iron. You see them in her song, broad-shouldered men with eyes like winter seas, their hands calloused from the hafts of axes and the salt spray of long voyages. The world here feels sharper, every breath a challenge. The Muses' melody echoes the slap of waves against wooden hulls, the low growl of voices raised in oaths, sworn over the rim of a drinking horn. Terpsichore's feet trace a dance that mimics the sway of a longship, each step a promise of storm and battle. You find yourself in the great hall of a Viking chieftain, the air thick with the scent of roasted boar and pine resin. The fire crackles in the hearth, its light glinting off the polished curve of a shield. Warriors press close to the long tables, their laughter deep and rough, their voices weaving a music of their own, one that smells of blood and cold air. A fringe fact twines into the Muses' song. Some say the berserkers wore the pelts of wolves, and bears their fury so fierce they became more beast than man in the clash of battle. You feel that echo in the hall's smoky warmth, a memory of how the Vikings saw the world as something to be taken, tested, tasted. Historians still argue whether the Viking kings were conquerors or traders, whether their raids were acts of desperation, or the wild hunger of men who refused to be tamed. But the Muses know that for these kings the line between plunder and poetry was as thin as the edge of a blade. The Muses' song grows louder, a hammering rhythm that quickens your pulse. You see a young king rise from his seat, his arm ring heavy on his wrist, his eyes bright with the promise of the sea. He raises a drinking horn, its rim carved with runes that sing of fate and fortune. In that moment you hear the hush that falls before a storm, the breath of the sea and the quiet promise of blood. Melpomeni's voice is softer here, a low hum beneath the thunder of the hall. She sings not of tragedy, but of the cost of glory of kings, who knew their names would be sung long after their bones had been claimed by the earth. You feel the weight of that knowing in the hush of the feast, in the flicker of firelight on faces already half turned to legend. The Muses lead you out into the cold night, the hall's warmth, the memory behind you. The sky is a black mirror, the stars bright as the edge of an axe. You see the dragon prows of the longships lined up on the shore, their eyes painted bright against the dark. The sea whispers to them a siren's call that will never be stilled. You watch as the Viking king steps into the prow, his cloak snapping in the wind, his hand steady on the haft of his axe. Terpsichore's dance quickens to match the roll of the waves, each step a prayer to the sea that will carry him forward or claim him for its own. The Muses' song softens as the ship slides into the black water, the oars dipping in slow sure rhythm. In their voices you hear the hush of snow falling on pine boughs, the low hum of the earth as it sleeps under frost. But you also hear the thunder of distant drums, the roar of a sea that will not be tamed. Historians still argue whether the Viking kings were tyrants or poets, whether their sagas were born of truth or the bright flash of steel in the dark. But as the Muses' song fades into the hush of the waves, you know that their stories were always both a dance of iron and song of death and laughter, and the hush that waits beyond every horizon. The path curves on the Muses' voices low in the cold air. You walk with them, your breath white in the night, the memory of fire and salt on your tongue. And as you go, you feel the echo of longships in your own pulse, the slow, relentless beat of men who dared to sail into the dark. The Muses' melody is a soft hum against the rush of the sea, a promise that even the coldest night cannot silence the music of kings who stood against the wind. The cold hush of the north recedes behind you. the Muses' song curling into a softer note as you step southward once more. The air warms, scented faintly with dust and the bitter tang of sweat. The rhythm of the Muses' melody shifts like a distant drumbeat, steady, resolute, a summons to a land far from the icy seas of the Vikings. Ahead lies the sweep of desert and olive grove, the hot, restless breath of the Levant. Here, under a blazing sun, another king's story waits to be sung, a tale of banners, unfurled and distant bells that called men from across the sea. Cleo's voice is measured, her words laced with both pride and warning. She sings of Richard the Lionheart, the king who would cross continents in the name of faith and vengeance. You stand at the edge of the Crusaders' camp, the air alive with the tang of horses and the hiss of oil in bronze lamps. The Muses' voices drift through the stony alleys, a harmony of prayer and ambition of sword sharpened in the name of a cause that burned bright and fierce. Richard's shadow looms large here, a king clad in chainmail, and the weight of a promise that would draw blood and gold from half a world away. Historians still argue whether Richard's crusade was a holy quest or a royal gamble, whether the cross on his chest was a symbol of faith or a banner for his own restless ambition. But the Muses' song holds both truths in a single breath. They sing of a king who was both knight and poet, who wove his own legend with every swing of his blade. You see him in the Muses' melody, tall and broad, his red-gold hair glinting in the sun, his eyes lit with the cold fire of a man who believes he was born to conquer. A fringe fact weaves into their song, some say. Richard once sold the city of London itself to raise gold for his war, a transaction that echoes like a jest in the dusty alleys of Jerusalem. The Muses' voices sharpen as they carry you to the battlefield. You hear the clash of steel, the guttural cries of men who stand shoulder to shoulder in the press of bodies and banners. The dust swirls with the heat of noon, the air tasting of iron and prayers half mumbled behind teeth clenched in fear. Terpsichore's dance is fierce here, her feet tracing the lines of battle as if she were weaving the very fate of kings in the dust. You watch as Richard rides at the head of his knights, his banner a flash of white and red that flutters in the dry wind. The Muses sing of his bold charges, his quick laughter that could cut through fear like a blade. They sing of the songs he wrote in the quiet of his tent, verses that spoke of both love and war, of a heart that could be both lion and lamb. But Melpomene's voice is never far from the melody, a quiet note of sorrow threading through the din. She sings of the cities taken and the walls razed to dust, of the bright towers that fell to greed and the dark weight of a king's pride. The Muses know that even the holiest wars leave their mark in blood. The sun blazes overhead as you follow the Muses down the winding alleys of Jerusalem, each stone worn smooth by centuries of prayers. You feel the heat of history against your skin, the hush of ancient dust and the faint echo of hymns sung by voices long turned to bone. The Muses' song carries it all, Richard's triumphs and his failures, the banners and the bones, the promise of a kingdom claimed in the name of God, but built on the sweat and blood of men. Terpsichore's dance slows as the day begins to wane, the sky streaked with the rose and gold of sunset. She pauses at the edge of a hill that overlooks the city's walls, her gaze soft and knowing. She reminds you that even the greatest kings must lay down their swords when the light fades, that the hush of twilight is the same for conquerors and peasants alike. You watch Richard in that dying light, his armour dulled by dust, his breath ragged with the weight of his own legend. The Muses sing of how he never claimed Jerusalem, how his heart longed for the green hills of England even as he knelt on holy ground. Historians still argue whether he was the hero of Christendom or the last note of a song that had always been more battle cry than prayer. The Muses gather close their song, a soft hum in the dusk. They sing not of victories or defeats, but of the weight of a crown carried across oceans and deserts, of the quiet truth that even a lion's heart can falter in the face of the endless march of the sun. You turn from the hill, the hush of the desert night settling around you like a cloak. The Muses walk beside you, their voices low and gentle in the darkness. The path stretches onward, each step a promise that the song will continue, that the stories of kings and the quiet between their names will never truly fade. And as you walk, you feel the weight of Richard's crown in the hush of the night, the slow, steady beat of a heart that roared in the sun and found silence in the falling dusk. The desert air fades into the damp hush of deep forests and snow-draped towers as you walk onward. The Muses' song tightens, their voices woven with iron, and the low echo of church bells. The world around you seems to hold its breath as you approach the cold heart of Russia, where the throne stands heavy with blood and fear. Cleo's voice is sharp as frost now, a song weaving the tale of Ivan the Terrible, the first Tsar of all Russia. You feel the weight of winter in every breath, the cold bite of air that tastes of pine resin and old iron. The Muses lead you down frozen avenues past wooden churches crusted with frost, past market squares where the snow muffles every sound. The hush of the Kremlin walls presses close the silence alive with the ghosts of prayers and curses. Ivan's figure emerges in the Muses' melody, tall, broad-shouldered, his brow heavy and dark. His eyes are bright, too bright, lit from within by a fire that never seems to sleep. The Muses sing of a boy king who watched his mother die in a haze of poisoned honey, who learned to trust no one but his own shadow. You feel the cold hunger of that gaze in every note. A fringe fact flits through this melody. Some say Ivan's library was a treasure trove of arcane tomes and forbidden scripts, a dark echo of the learning he clutched to his heart like a shield against the night. Terpsichore's dance is slow here, each step heavy as the boots of the Oprichniki Ivan's black-garbed riders who spread terror in the Tsar's name. The Muses' song is sharper now, a thread of iron beneath the swirl of snow. You see Ivan's court in the flicker of torchlight, nobles in furs lined with ermine, their laughter thin as ice. Melpomene's voice is a lament that chills the blood singing of the feast Ivan held after the death of his beloved Anastasia, a feast that was a funeral in all but name. Her death turned his heart to iron, and the Muses know that Iron Kings can only break what they love. Historians still argue whether Ivan's cruelty was madness or method, whether the Tsar's hand was guided by the will of God or the echoes of his own haunted mind. But the Muses' melody holds both truths in its hushed harmonies. You see the cold glint of Ivan's crown, the way it weighs on his brow like a shackle, the way it reflects the firelight like the memory of a dream. You step into the halls of the Kremlin, the air heavy with the scent of beeswax and cold incense. The icons on the walls shimmer in the glow of flickering lamps, their painted eyes watching as the Muses sing of Ivan's wrath. You hear the low hum of prayers, the hush of 1,000 voices that dared not speak above a whisper. The hush of a kingdom that feared its own name. Terpsichore's dance becomes a slow circling step, a waltz that echoes the slow tightening of Ivan's power. The Muses sing of the Oprichniki's black horses, their hooves muffled by snow as they carried out the Tsar's will. They sing of Novgorod's bells that tolled for days as Ivan's fury burned through the city like a winter storm. You feel the weight of that fury in your chest, the way it settles like a cold stone behind your ribs. The Muses' voices grow softer touched with sorrow and dread. In Ivan's story they sing not of a king, but of a man who became the echo of every cruelty done to him, who carved his name into the frost of Russia's soul. The night deepens as you leave the Kremlin, the hush of snow falling in the courtyards behind you. The Muses gather close their song, a quiet murmur against the endless white. They sing of how Ivan died in his sleep, his staff clutched in his hand, his dreams still filled with the ghost he could never banish. Historians still argue whether Ivan's death was the end of an era, or the start of something darker still. But in the Muses' song you hear the truth that lingers in every hush of the Russian winter, that some kings do not rule their kingdoms, some kings are devoured by them. You walk on through the hush of falling snow, the Muses' melody soft and unbroken. Each flake that drifts down is a note of memory, a whisper of iron and ice. You feel the chill of even's rain in your bones, the quiet certainty that even in the silence of history his name is a cold wind that will never fade. And as you follow the Muses deeper into the hush of night, you know that their song is far from over. There are other thrones waiting other crowns to weigh heavy on mortal brows, but in the quiet between each breath the music of kings and their haunted dreams will echo on. The hush of Russian snow fades behind you, the Muses' song shifting to something lighter, sweeter on the surface like spun sugar stretched over a dagger's edge. The cold breath of winter gives way to warm breezes perfumed with orange blossoms and rosewater. Ahead lies a kingdom of silken masks and gilded halls, where power dances to the music of flutes and laughter drips like honey from every word. This is the court of the Sun King, and the Muses' song swells to greet the dawn. Versailles rises before you, a palace of gold and light that seems to float above the earth. Cleo's voice is bright, touched with a wry amusement. She sings of Louis the Fortune, the king who called himself the Sun, whose every step was a performance, and whose every breath was measured in the flicker of candlelight. You walk through the marble halls, the Muses' melody echoing in the hush of gilded mirrors and crystal chandeliers. The scent of beeswax and perfume lingers in the air, sweet and cloying, a mask for the sweat of endless intrigues. Historians still argue whether Louis was the last great king or the first of the men who had become more symbol than sovereign. But the Muses know that for Louis there was no difference. Terpsichore's dance quickens her feet, tracing the patterns of the minuet across the polished floors. Each step is a performance, each gesture a whisper of power cloaked in silk. The Muses' song is light and bright, but beneath it runs a darker note, the hush of envy and ambition that echoes in the shadows of every gilded gallery. A fringe fact shimmers through the music. Some say Louis rose each day at dawn to be dressed by his courtiers, a ritual of power as precise as any battle plan. You see him in the Muses' melody, the golden embroidery of his coat catching the light, his face as serene as the sun he claimed for his own. Around him swirl the courtiers' moths drawn to a flame that will never warm them. Melpomene's voice is a soft sigh beneath the flutes and laughter. She sings of how even the sun must set, how the glow of Versailles was bought. With the sweat of peasants and the hunger of those who would never taste the sweetmeats of the king's endless feasts. The Muses' song winds through the hall of mirrors, each note a reflection of beauty that could never quite hide the cracks beneath. You step into the gardens, the air rich with the scent of orange blossoms and the low murmur of fountains. The Muses pause at the edge of a parterre, their eyes bright in the late afternoon light. They sing of Louis as he walked these paths, his every movement watched and mirrored by those who would kill for a single glance of favour. Terpsichore's dance slows to match the pace of the Sun King's measured steps. She reminds you that even in the most carefully tended garden, weeds will find a way to grow. You hear the laughter of courtiers, the murmur of promises and secrets traded beneath the soft rustle of silk. In the hush of the garden's hidden corners, the Muses' song holds a note of warning. Historians still argue whether Versailles was a palace or a prison, whether Louis's endless performances were a mask he wore or a truth he could never escape. But the Muses' melody weaves both answers into the hush of the golden halls. They sing of a king who made himself a god and found in the end that even the sun must bow to the horizon. The dusk deepens, the sky streaked with violet and rose. The Muses' song softens the bright notes, fading into a hush that tastes of dust and old dreams. You see Louis in that final light, his face lined with age, his eyes bright still with the stubborn glow of a man who refuses to be anything less than what the world demands. You leave Versailles behind as the first stars bloom in the darkening sky. The Muses' melody carries you onward, each note a footstep on the path that stretches into the hush of night. They sing of how kings build their worlds from gold, and sighs how even the brightest masks will crack in the hush of twilight. As you walk with them, you feel the hush of Versailles settle into your bones, the scent of roses and the soft echo of laughter that will never truly fade. The Muses know that the Sun King's glow was never just light, that his court was always both a dream and a cage, and as the path curves onward into the hush of night, the Muses' song promises that even the brightest crowns are just another note in the endless music of history. You walk away from the mirrored halls of Versailles, the Muses' song soft and low as it follows you into the darkness. The scent of orange blossoms fades, replaced by the iron tang of blood and the rough whisper of winter winds. The path before you is marked by the hushed shuffle of feet and the crackle of distant drums. The Muses gather close, their voices laced with sorrow and finality. You're about to enter the last chapter of an age, the twilight of kings. Cleo's voice is solemn now, every word a knell of what was and will never be again. She sings of monarchs brought low by the rising tide of voices they can no longer command, of crowns toppled by the weight of hunger and the quiet fury of the people. You step into the heart of Europe, where kings once ruled by divine right and now tremble at the whispers of liberty. The Muses lead you down narrow cobbled streets lit by the glow of guttering lanterns. You smell the acrid smoke of tallow candles and the sour sweat of men whose patience has run dry. In the hush of the night you hear the echo of distant cries, liberté, égalité, fraternité à promise, and a threat wrapped in the same breath. Historians still argue whether the age of kings ended with a single blow, or with 1,000 quiet acts of rebellion. But the Muses' song carries both in its melody the grand guillotines of Paris and the quiet tears of servants who watched their masters fall. Melpomene's voice is a lament, a low, insistent note that speaks of a world breaking like glass under a storm. You find yourself in the cold hush of the French Revolution. The Muses' song twists through the smoky air, weaving around the rhythm of drum beats that call for the head of a king. You see Louis XVI in the flicker of torchlight, his face pale, his eyes wide, with the stunned realization that the music of his reign has faltered at last. A fringe fact shimmers through the melody. Some say Louis XVI's last words were an apology to the executioner, a single human note in the cold machinery of fate. The Muses' song holds that whisper close, a fleeting kindness in the roar of a crowd that will not be stilled. Tersica's dance slows her feet, tracing the careful, trembling steps of a man who knows the scaffold waits. She reminds you that even the mightiest kings are still flesh and bone, that even the Sun King's heirs must bow to the hush of the blade. But the Muses do not sing only of France. They carry you further across seas and borders where other crowns slip from trembling fingers. In England, kings who once ruled by the grace of God watch their power bend and break before the slow, relentless tide of parliament and protest. In the cold palaces of Vienna and Berlin, emperors feel the hush of the people's anger creeping like frost beneath their golden thrones. The Muses' song is both lament and hymn, each note a testament to the twilight of an age. You feel it in your bones, the soft final hush that falls when the last chord of a king's rule fades into silence. And in that hush, there is both sorrow and something that tastes like hope. You step away from the tumults of Europe, the Muses' melody shifting as you cross oceans to the Americas. Here too the echo of crowns lingers in the hush of revolution. You feel it in the crack of musket fire, in the slow march of men who once bowed and now stand straight. the Muses sing of a world remade by voices raised of thrones traded for the promise of a voice in the hush of morning. Historians still argue whether the twilight of kings was the end of history or the start of something new. But as the Muses gather close around you, their song weaves a quieter truth that every kingdom ends in a hush, every crown falls silent in the end. You turn back the path behind you, a mosaic of splintered thrones and whispered names. The Muses' song is softer now, a hush that tastes of ash and possibility. Terpsichore's dance has slowed to a single measured step, each movement a memory of kings who danced to music they no longer controlled. The night deepens, the stars cold and distant above you. The Muses' melody is a lullaby in the hush of a world remade a promise that even as the crowns fall silent, the stories they sang will echo on. You feel the weight of those echoes in your chest, a soft ache that tastes of endings and the quiet breath of beginnings. As you walk onward, the Muses' song follows a soft, steady hum in the hush of the night. The twilight of kings has come, but the music their dreams, their mistakes, and the slow, bright promise of dawn will sing on forever. The hush of Europe's twilight lingers in the air as you step forward, the Muses' song, a soft thread that draws you east once more. The path winds across mountains and rivers through the hush of ancient temples and the silent courtyards of forbidden cities. The air tastes of jasmine and rain, the scent of incense and the low whisper of distant drums. You are nearing the final chapter of this night's journey, where the last emperor waits in the hush of a world, changing faster than any crown can keep pace. Cleo's voice is gentle, now touched with a reverence that tastes of endings and the soft promise of memory. She sings of Puyi, the last emperor of China, who wore a dragon-embroidered robe, while the world around him was already dreaming of republics and railroads. You find yourself in the quiet hush of the forbidden city. The Muses stand at its gates, their faces soft with the weight of what lies within. The red walls are tall and silent, the yellow tiles of the palace roofs catching the first glow of dawn like a promise that has not yet faded. The air is heavy with the scent of wet earth and peonies, a sweetness that carries the weight of centuries. The Muses' melody echoes through the courtyards, each note a footstep in the hush of imperial routine. You see Puyi as a boy, barely old enough to hold the weight of the dragon throne, his eyes wide with wonder and fear. Historians still argue whether he was a puppet of others or a monarch who never learned how to be anything else. But the Muses know that a crown placed on the head of a child will always carry the hush of tragedy. A fringe fact weaves itself into the melody. Some say that in his last days as Emperor Puyi would sit for hours at the palace gates watching the dust of the city streets beyond the red walls. The Muses sing of that quiet vigil, a boy king held fast in a world that was already leaving him behind. Terpsichore's dance is slow and graceful, her feet tracing the soft patterns of courtly ritual across the flagstones. She reminds you that even the grandest ceremonies cannot stop the tide of history, that even the most carefully tended garden will bloom beyond its walls. The Muses' song holds that hush, close, weaving it into a lullaby of memory and loss. You step into the throne room, its silence as vast as the Empire Puyi was meant to rule. The air smells of lacquered wood and old silk, of pages turned in books no longer read. The Muses' voices are hushed here, a soft murmur that tastes of endings and the small bright moments that slip through even the heaviest doors. Melpomeni's voice is tender now, a note of quiet sorrow that curls around the pillars like the slow unfurling of incense smoke. She sings of Puyi's exile, of how he watched the world change from behind palace gates and then from the window of a prison cell, of how the last emperor learned to garden and to tend goldfish, finding solace in small lives when his own crown had turned to dust. Historians still argue whether Puyi was the last breath of an old world or the first sigh of something new. But the Muses' song weaves both truths into the hush of the dawn. They sing of how even the smallest kings leave echoes in the quiet of history, how every step he took in silk slippers still ripples outward like a whisper in the morning light. The sun rises slowly over the forbidden city, its pale light brushing the red walls, and the gold dragons coiled across their roofs. The Muses watch the light spread their eyes soft with understanding. In that glow you see not just the end of a dynasty, but the hush of a new world waking a world where emperors will fade, but the quiet song of those who once dreamed of them will never quite be silenced. You step back from the throne room, the hush of the palace settling around you like a final breath. The Muses gather close, their voices low and steady, a soft promise in the hush of morning. They sing of how every king is a note in the endless melody of time, how every crown is a promise and a burden, and in the end a memory. As you walk away from the forbidden city, the Muses' song follows you, a quiet hum in the hush of dawn. The last emperor has stepped down from the dragon throne, but the music of his story, of all kings' stories, still shivers in the soft air. The path winds onward, the sky brightening above you, and the Muses' song a gentle echo in the hush of morning. You know that even though the last emperor's reign has ended, the music of his name will drift on the wind, soft as the sigh of silk in the hush of dawn. The hush of dawn deepens as you walk forward, the Muses' song soft as breath against your ear. The path behind you is a tapestry of kings of iron crowns and gold thrones of laughter and blood, and the soft hush of dreams that drifted into silence. But the Muses are not done singing. In their final verse they lead you not to another throne, but to the quiet spaces that linger in the echoes of power, the echoes of the empire where even the dust remembers the weight of crowns. Cleo's voice is a soft sigh, each note a memory of empires that rose like dawn and fell like dusk. She sings of the hush that settles over broken columns and crumbling palaces, of how even the stones hold the music of the men and women who once called themselves king. You walk with her through ruined halls, your footsteps echoing in the silence of history. The air tastes of old earth and moss, the scent of libraries long forgotten, and the hush of velvet curtains that once muffled the laughter of courtiers. The Muses' song is gentle now, a thread of music that weaves through the cracks in the marble and the hush of cobwebbed archways. Terpsichore's dance slows to a stillness, her hands raised in a gesture that is both blessing and farewell. Historians still argue whether empire is a thing of swords or of dreams, whether the hush of the past is just silence or a promise that even in the quiet the music of history will play on. The Muses know that both are true, that every stone remembers, that every breath of dust is a lullaby for kings who can no longer command the hush. You stand in the heart of a ruined palace, its roof open to the sky, the stars cold and bright above you. Melpomene's lament is soft as a whisper, a promise that even the weight of empires cannot silence the hush of a single heartbeat. She sings of how kings rise and fall, how the hush between their names is where the world truly turns. The Muses gather close, their circle complete. Their voices blend in a harmony that tastes of dusk and dawn, of endings and beginnings. They sing of how the hush is not an ending but a promise that the song will always begin again. You feel that truth settle into your bones, a quiet comfort in the hush of night. A fringe fact shimmers through the melody. Some say the last echoes of empire are found not in dusty tomes or broken statues, but in the lullabies. Mothers still sing to their children, stories of kings and kingdoms that flicker like candle flames in the hush of the night. You smile at that thought, the soft echo of it warm against your heart. The Muses' song softens each note, a final breath that lingers in the hush. They sing of how the music of kings is never truly gone, how it lingers in every whispered story, in every sigh of wind that stirs the dust of the past. They sing of how you too are part of that music, now your footsteps a quiet echo in the hush of 1,000 forgotten halls. You turn away from the ruins, the Muses' song, a gentle hum that carries you forward. The dawn is brightening the sky soft and pale as the hush of a new day. And in that hush, you feel the promise of every king who ever wore a crown, that the world will always turn, that the song will always rise again. You walk on with the Muses at your side, their voices fading into the hush of the morning. You carry their song in your breath, in the quiet beat of your own heart. And as you step into the light, you know that the hush is not the end, but the soft, patient breath of a world that will always sing again. The Muses' song softens a final note that lingers in the hush like the last sigh of a candle flame. You feel it settle around you, a quiet blanket of memory and music. The air is soft and cool, each breath tasting of the hush of dawn and the promise of rest. The Muses gather close, their voices no longer singing but humming a lullaby for the soul. You feel the weight of the night's journey lift from your shoulders, replaced by the soft warmth of the hush. Your heart slows each beat, a soft echo in the quiet that surrounds you. The stars fade into the pale glow of morning, their light gentle as the brush of a hand against your cheek. The Muses' eyes are soft now, their smiles touched with the peace of endings and the quiet thrill of what waits beyond. They know that every story has its last note, and that even the hush is a kind of music. You breathe in the scent of dawn, fresh earth, cool air, the faint sweetness of distant blossoms. The hush of the world feels like a promise, a soft cradle for your thoughts. You let your eyes drift closed, the Muses' melody, weaving around you like a soft blanket. In the hush there is no need for crowns or thrones, only the quiet beat of your own heart and the gentle rise and fall of your breath. The Muses' song fades into silence, and in that silence you find the peace of knowing that the music of kings will echo on soft as a lullaby, strong as the hush of the dawn. Sleep well, dream gently, and let the music of the past carry you into the hush of the night.